Hey everybody, we're back with another top 5 reasons to use Logic today, and today we're going to focus on the reverb tools inside Logic. It's not just ChromaVerb and Space Designer, there's a number of other different places where there's reverbs and things that we can do creatively with reverb. So buckle in, we're going to look at these 5 things. I hope that this is going to be really useful for you to see once again just some of the areas that Logic really shines in. Okay, so let's take a look at the top 5 things. These are things which are not necessarily just the reverbs listed in order, but the reverbs, some of them, and then some techniques that are really easy to do in Logic with those reverbs. So first, I want to look at what we have here with ChromaVerb. ChromaVerb is one of the newer reverbs in here, and it's really nice sounding reverb. It's really powerful, has a lot of flexibility, and yet it still maintains a lot of simplicity. So here it is with a vocal plate, vocal hall type preset.
Was a story from my youth, was a story that was true.
So we have damping, EQ, and one page here. Plus we have an output EQ in here. So the first one's gonna change the overall character of the reverb, and the second one is gonna change the overall just spectrum as the output. We have things down here in our main with our attack, size, density, overall decay time, distance, which is going to emulate a bigger room, dry, wet. So all the normal things. On the details page, we also have the ability to modulate the actual reverb. We have a smoothing for the modulation. We have an early, late reflection slider, so we can do more early reflections or late reflections. We have an overall width as well. But one thing I think is interesting is I have another ChromaVerb here pulled up. This is the exact default. The quality is set to high by default instead of ultra. So you could actually be turning this up and experimenting with the different quality modes as well. Just a great reverb overall. With the algorithms, we have a good amount of a variety of different types of sounds. So you're going to be able to find one that works for what you need. Overall, just a really great tool for this. Okay, so that being said, it's not the only place that we have reverbs, and that goes for all of the ones in the list here. So we have ChromaVerb, Nverb, which is more of a classic one. This is a rebranding of one of the earlier ones we've had. It's a decent one. We also have Silververb, which is as well one of the original Logic ones, just repurposed. But we do have the legacy ones, which are still here if you hold down the Option key when going into your plugins. So with these ones, we have the Averb. I don't recommend using these ones, but they're still here. And then Goldverb. So you're going to recognize some of these old ones. So we have a lot of different tools, but that doesn't mean that they're all the right ones at the right time. So for number 2, instead of looking at one of those, inside our multi-effects under the step effects, we have a reverb built into this with a few different algorithms, a few different types. So we could actually use this whole tool as a reverb and add some of the other cool things that come with it. So we have the ability to add reverb that has a lot of motion to it, that's not just simply a reverb tool all by itself. And we can come through here under the presets. If you want to see some of these, for instance, we have a gate and space, for instance. And I'm going to create a new track just so we can play these. Let's see, what do we have on this one? We don't have anything, so let's do it here. We'll just do a synthesizer for a moment. I'm going to pull this over onto this synth so we can hear it. So let's take a look at just a couple of the presets right off the bat, just so you can get a sense for this. We have a deep cavern, which uses the reverb. And it's doing things like filter cutoff, gate mix, and panning with the steps. But let's take away the panning for a second. And let's do this with the reverb mix. So by putting a reverb module inside the step effects, it allows us to have a lot of space and motion and movement with this. This is one of the best parts about the step effects, is having this type of sound. Not only this, but we have the delay and then all the filter stuff. This adds so much space and depth and creativity to certain sounds. So I want to include this particular tool as one of my top 5 for reverbs. Another thing that we have with this, let's turn off that and let's load up Alchemy for a moment. So a lot of these instruments came from other places, and because of that, they came with effects built in. I'm not 100% convinced Logic or Apple would have built in reverb to certain places like this, but because they did, now we have effects built into some of our instruments. So in the case of Alchemy, don't forget that if you're trying to get a certain sound, you can use the onboard effects, which includes a reverb. So we can actually come through here and use that. We have 3 different ones of them. We have an acoustic reverb, a classic reverb, and a convolution reverb. Convolution reverb, of course, is something that I'm really interested in, partially because we can come through and use a lot of the ones we already have, or we can load some of our own. And I go around the world creating reverbs. Some of mine, let's see if I can find them real quickly in here. Many of them in the Czech Republic and Central Europe. And so with those, what I want to do is to be able to use these in various places. And now I can take a lot of these that I've recorded in castles and churches and concert halls and bring them directly into an instrument that I'm making here with Alchemy. So that's a really amazing way to be able to incorporate this. Then we have some basic controls over that, the dry, wet, pre-delay size, stereo, start, end, etc. So we have a lot of additional functionality as we dig in deeper. All of this, of course, we can also use the modulation section for this. We can make an assignment with this. So not all of them can be controlled using modulation, like the size can't and the delay can't. The wet can. So we can come through here and add a sequencer to control the wet amount and have a really interesting modulation of this parameter. In addition to that, we could do the dry. So I could do the dry and wet separately. And we have stereo amount we can do a modulator with. We can't do that with the start or the end, the pre-delay or the size. However, we can do this with the filter that is attached to it, the resonance for that. So all of that part of the convolution reverb can be also worked with it. Okay, great additional set of effects inside Alchemy for specific instruments. This works with all of our sampled instruments, anything from the EXS24, all of our synthesizer types in here. This is an amazing tool that just gets deeper and deeper the more you look at it. Okay, so that brings us to Space Designer, which is another really cool tool. Let's go back into, let's load up just strings for a second. And let's load on Space Designer right here. One of the reasons why I love Space Designer so much is, again, because it has the ability to load impulses that you record or make. It has inside of it now the impulse response utility, which you can actually use with speakers and microphones to create impulses or edit them. Has so many tools inside here in terms of manipulating your sound, etc. But because of the whole synthesized portion of this, so there's the sample side where you bring in an actual sample of an impulse recorded someplace. It also has a synthesized section, and this creates an impulse as you make changes. So for instance, if I want to make some adjustments to my sounds, lower my envelope of the filter, here's a density envelope. We can do a really lo-fi one here. So we can create a reverb using all of these parameters. So we have these three main ones right here, and as we adjust these, it is creating a new impulse that is synthesized based on what we're deciding. And then we get to instantly use that. And then we have all these other controls down here. So again, just a really great tool. If I'm not using it for my own created impulse responses, I'm using this to synthesize complete new ones based off of all the settings. And you can get exactly the reverb you want based on how you're creating it. One other thing that we've done with Space Designer and the impulse response utility is to measure reverbs of other units. So again, going back into the impulse response utility, this isn't just for creating it from acoustic spaces. You could actually send this with cables to a reverb unit and capture the reverb of some other specific piece of hardware. So you can actually incorporate these impulses into reverbs from other DAWs, from hardware reverbs. You can do this with acoustic spaces. It's just endless type of things. Not only that, but you could use this for things like equalizers and distortion units and all kinds of things. The impulse response part is actually really cool. And we should do some more videos about that at some point. Okay, the last thing, number 5, would be the ease of use for actually working with reverbs on your channels inside Logic. So we don't typically put reverbs on the actual tracks that you're using. We would do this through buses. On bus number 7, we would put a reverb. Let's use ChromaVerb for now. And with ChromaVerb, we could just do a basic preset. One thing that you would want to do with this is manipulating how this sounds. So there's a few different parts to this. One of them is we could put another effect after this in the chain. So we could do something like a compressor. And in the case of this, that's flying around. In the case of this, we would sidechain this off of a different instrument. So instruments, say we wanted to do this off of the bass. So now this reverb is going to change its levels depending on how we set the settings when the bass is playing. So the bass could actually turn down the reverb for the other instruments.
And I knew that it was here. I heard it once, it stayed for life. I knew that it would never leave. I knew that this was going to be my knife. In the end, it haunted me. And in the end, I haunted you. And in the time it took to figure out it's true. And when it came around to me, I knew that this this was what was supposed to be.
So if you're paying attention, the dips are happening at a different time than the string part that I'm playing. So the strings are getting pulled down depending on when the bass part plays. And it's not that the strings are getting pulled down, it is just the reverb that's getting pulled down. So you can actually change the feel of a reverb part of the mix. You can change the muddiness. If you want a really dense reverb, but you don't want it to be there all the time, you can have it sidechained as other instruments are playing. Another thing to think about, instead of using ChromaVerb stereo, we can use this as dual mono. Let's close the compressor and turn it off for a moment. This is another really cool effect that we have because of the way Logic is designed. We can adjust the left and the right separately, but we can also turn on the mid-side capabilities. And then we come out here, the mid, which is the part of the reverb that would be the same in both left and right channels in the center, we can change, and we can do a different one for side. So that's the things that are different, and the here out in the left and right channel is a little bit wider. So in this case, I could use, for instance, a room for the mid that maybe is smaller, and then for the sides, we increase the size and distance. And so in the center part, you'll have a shorter, more compact reverb, and then as it goes out into this virtual room, it's going to be longer and wider out in those side rooms. Let's do this with a much bigger sound for a second. So now it's even bigger as it goes out. And then we can match the mid if we want to with a little bit longer. Or we could do the exact opposite and make exactly in the center part of the reverb longer and the side shorter. I don't think I would have used that very often, but I've definitely done this where I'm increasing the reverb as it goes away from the center. And what that does is it gives you the big reverb still, but allows you to stay out of the way of the voice and the snare and the kick and all the instruments which are going to be right in the middle and the bass. Okay, so these are the 5 things I was thinking about when it came to reverb. We looked at ChromaVerb, we looked at Step Effects, Alchemy, Space Designer with impulses, and now sidechaining and the MS function when doing dual mono. So much stuff for reverb and space. We haven't even gotten into delays. And there's probably other things, thinking about how you could do this with surround sound or use some of the other binaural audio things to increase your reverb and change the space around things. But that's for another video. Hope you enjoyed these 5 things we looked at. Let me know in the comments if there's things that you're thinking about. What are your favorite reverb techniques within Logic and tools? And we're going to do another one of these videos probably in about 48 hours.